When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
If you thought goldenly breaded McDonald's chicken couldn't get more golden, think Golder. Because new sweet and smoky special edition gold sauce is here. Made for your chicken favorites. At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
The Presidencies of the United States is a proud member of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Hello and welcome to the Presidencies of the United States. I'm your host, Jerry Landry. Welcome back for William Wirt Part 2. In case for some reason you're listening to this episode without listening to Part 1, I do advise you to go back and listen to that episode before proceeding, as we covered Wirt's younger days, including some tragedies in his early life, some of his wild times as a young man, and his settling down and starting his career and family. We'll pick up where we left off last episode, but before we do that, I wanted to say a special thank you to my friend and fellow podcaster, Howard Dory of the Plodding Through the President's podcast. Howard and his wife Jess in their podcast explore various moments in presidential history, ranging from the tale of Jefferson's killer ram to the Billy Possum stuffed animal made to honor William Howard Taft, but which never earned a special place in kids' hearts like the teddy bear did. While they do uncover some hilarious stories, they also explore more serious topics, like Andrew Jackson's adopted native child Lincoln and the story of the Amistad captives. If you don't listen to Plodding Through the Presidents already, just go to the website, plodpod.com, or search for Plodding Through the Presidents wherever you get your podcasts. I'll also have a link on the page for this episode on my website, presidenciespodcast.com. Without further ado, after this brief message, let's get back to my conversation with Howard.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Checking off the boxes on your to-do list is a great feeling. And when it comes to checking off coverage, a State Farm agent can help you choose an option that's right for you. Whether you prefer talking in person, on the phone, or using the award-winning app, it's nice knowing you have help finding coverage that best fits your needs. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Now, as part of his work in the Virginia House of Delegates, Wirt was assigned to, quote, a special committee on international trade, which ultimately reported out resolutions written by Wirt, quote, that vindicated Jefferson's administration and its trade embargoes. Now, outside of this work, Wirt also, quote, served on a civic committee to encourage the establishment of manufacturing in the South. And if that wasn't enough, the summer of 1809 found Wirt writing essays under the title The Sentinel in defense of the new president, his friend James Madison. Glasner notes that, quote, Wirt changed his writing style in an attempt to confuse readers as to the identity of the author. So familiar was Wirt to the readers of the Republican press in those days that he felt a nom de plume alone was insufficient camouflage. But trying to change his writing style didn't work, and they still knew it was him. In February 1809, Wirt wrote to his one-time mentor and patron, Benjamin Edwards, about the advancement of his political career as follows, quote, you wish me to aspire to the presidency of the United States. I can make no such extravagant calculations of future greatness. If I can make my family independent and leave to my children the inheritance of a respectable name, my expectations, and believe me, my wishes will be fulfilled.
Yeah, leave them that whole meatpacking industry. he's got going.
They
could just sit. They're sitting pretty on making calves jelly.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. They're set for life. What a legacy.
Yeah.
But it's funny, and you and I both have seen so many folks in history who are so ambitious, striving for the presidency, and his main motivation, he's still focused on this idea of, I want to do right by my kids. I want them to have and be settled. Unfortunately, Elizabeth's father, Colonel Robert Gamble, passed away unexpectedly in April 1810 after falling from a horse, which is got to be one of the worst ways to go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the best.
It's not the best. And in his will, he left the Wirt's house to his wife. So at least she's taken care of, but, it's not good, and it's very sudden. 1810 would also mark the beginning of another literary endeavor for Wirt, as he and some compatriots began penning essays under the pseudonym Old Bachelor. They would ultimately write 33 essays total between 1810 and 1813. Now, unlike the Rainbow Association, Wirt would be the ringleader for this one, and, quote, is generally credited with writing the bulk of the essays. He would be the one who started it off with the first few essays and then would be interspersed throughout the rest of the series. And as noted by Glassner, quote, the Old Bachelor essays extolled the virtue of an education rich in the classics, forensic eloquence, and the social graces. They also touched on the subjects of gambling, avarice, and patriotism.
Okay.
Number 17, which Wirt wrote, criticized politicians of his time, asserting, quote, look at the remains of our revolutionary worthies, these plain, honest sons of valor and virtue, and compare them with the silken, ducking observance of the present day.
It's always that, look what's happened. Look how far we've fallen. From day one, I feel they were looking at that and thinking we're never going to measure up to the politicians of last week.
Yeah. I mean, things were so great yesterday. Where are those politicians now?
Exactly.
But these essays would, of course, they would be popular and would be collected into book form in 1814. And meanwhile, in his political life, Wirt had hoped to be named to the position of U.S. Attorney General in 1811 when it was vacated by Caesar A. Rodney, but it was not to be, as William Pinckney was tapped for the post. Now, around this time, rumors started going around that Wirt, while in town on business in Williamsburg, had, while visiting the home of his friend William Russell, engaged in relations with Russell's unmarried daughter Kitty, impregnating her in the process.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. There were a few other men who were also named as possibilities, and ultimately, when the math was done on when the conception had to happen, it turned out that Wirt was not in Williamsburg at the time, but the rumors persisted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, he at least wasn't the father of the baby, but rumors persisted, and he was still being accused of being Kitty's, quote, original seducer.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So, you remember, he was a bad boy before, so, of course it's got to be him.
But he's changed. He's had all these kids and processed all this meat and defended all these murderers, That changes a man.
He's a good guy. Yeah. Now, Wirt managed to get both William and Kitty Russell to testify in affidavits witnessed by the mayor and aldermen of Williamsburg that Wirt had, quote, never at any time committed an act or uttered a sentiment to Kitty incompatible with the purest virtue and the strictest honor.
And no affidavits like that were ever coerced or anything.
No. I mean, coercion, payoffs, no, never. But this was around the time that the vacancy came in the attorney generalship, and so Jabbour asserts that this rumor may have played a role in him not getting named to the post at the time.
Yeah. Back then, if you were thought to possibly be an awful person, you might not get appointed to the cabinet.
I know, right? Oh, for the days. I mean, luckily we don't have to deal with that now. So
No.
now, as the nation declared war on Great Britain, the Wirts had to deal with some disagreements of their own domestically. Because in 1812, William considered renting a separate office space for his legal practice outside of their home. You can imagine at this point, with so many kids running around, he may want to not work from home anymore.
It seems like he was away a lot. Like all these letters from Elizabeth, they wouldn't have happened if they weren't in separate places.
Exactly.
So for that, I'm grateful.
Yeah.
That we have those records. But yeah, no, I can see he had stuff to do. You can't be home. Poor Elizabeth.
But she's like, no, you're not leaving me with all these kids. And she did concede to his wish that he be given, quote, an upstairs room in the main house for his office. So we'll at least give you like some space, but no, you're going to be here in case these kids are running amok.
Does he get a good view from that room of the slaughtering of the lambs? Does he get to see?
Let's hope it came with the best view.
Yeah, you need that courtyard view.
Yes. And then in the summer of 1813, as there were rumors that Richmond would be facing invasion by British forces, William raised a company of artillery, a move that Elizabeth resented, quipping to him in a letter that, quote, you will have your career. So she's at the point, she's like, I'm tired of this.
Yeah, that seems unusual for the time.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of conversations that were had that just weren't documented and saved in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And so obviously she was opposing any move that would threaten to take him away from the household for a good amount of time. But William saw this move as preserving, quote, his public reputation as a man of honor for the benefit of his family and as a stepping stone to public office.
I feel like it's about setting expectations. I feel like John Quincy Adams, somebody like him, basically let Louisa know up front, hey, I'm not going to be around much. I've got to do whatever I'm called to do. And there's a lot of books to read. So you might not be seeing a lot of me.
Yes.
Whereas Wirt was like, I don't know, baby, I'm going to retire next year. One more year. It'll be you and me, baby. And yeah, she probably just got sick of that after a while.
Yeah. She's like, that 1 year is not coming. You've been promising that for like 10 years now. It's not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I am 18 years old and it is time for us to retire.
I am ready to retire at the age of 18. I've been giving birth for so long. Yes. Now, as described by Jabor, quote, during the Wirt years in Richmond, William increasingly defined himself in accordance with standards of masculinity, which scholars often describe and contrast each other. The Northern model of the professional breadwinner and the Southern ideal of the man of honor. So he's trying to fit into all of these things, and it's tough to please everybody.
Yeah, because I feel like that Southern man of honor was supposed to be in crushing debt, like a Jefferson or someone. But that Northern breadwinner, you had to actually pay for stuff. That's tough to reconcile.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, those are my ill-informed economic thoughts.
Whatever he was doing, it wasn't working. And then he keeps on trying to, play soldier, and it's like, you're definitely not gonna be able to bring home the bacon with that.
Right. Well, the bacon they're making the bacon right there at home.
They've got the bacon. Yeah.
Yeah. Now the bread, someone does have to go win that.
Yes.
But the bacon is there.
The bacon is there. Well, and ultimately nothing would come of Wirt's artillery unit as the government failed to provide proper funding for it. And it would ultimately be deployed to, quote, the marshes along the York River in September 1814 after the British attack on Washington, D.C., but they would see no action. So thankfully for William, Elizabeth, the kids, he's not ever in any real danger. So then in late 1813, Wirt made a deal with John Clark, the founder of, quote, a foundry in Chesterfield County for cannon casing, and in 1814 traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with some of his contacts there, quote, in a successful attempt to secure governmental contracts. So this is during the War of 1812. They need cannons. Hey, we can provide those.
Okay, so now he's an arms dealer? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Okay.
Defending murderers, arms deals. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the drug part. When Kingpin- Yeah.
You know, it's coming.
Yeah, he starts breaking bad in that courtyard,
Spoiler alert, Florida is going to come up at some point. So, yeah. So, in addition to his commentary on Madison's state after the burning of Washington, in which Wirt described him as, quote, miserably shattered and woebegone. In short, he looks brokenhearted. We also get from Wirt a few months later this commentary on the state of government. Quote, government is but an uphill work at best, and not least perhaps the selective government of ours, where the public good is the last thing thought of by the legislator, his own re-election being the first. What a stormy life is this of the politician.
Some things never change. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, despite this commentary, Wirt was turned to time and again when a position in Washington was rumored to be becoming vacant soon. In 1813 and 1815, friends gauged his interest in taking up a seat in the U.S. Senate, but both times Wirt declined the honor. And finally, the war would come to an end, and the Wirts would continue their rise in Richmond society. Meanwhile, Wirt traveled to Washington, D.C. at the beginning of 1815 as he was scheduled to make his first appearance before the Supreme Court that February as counsel for the defense. But due to a delay, the hearing that he was to appear in was delayed until the next year. And Wirt had been eager to test his legal abilities before his opponent in the case, which was none other than the current Attorney General, William Pinckney, the guy who got the post that he wanted. When they finally had the chance to face off the next year, Wirt noted that Pinckney, quote, has nothing of the rapid and unerring analysis of Chief Justice John Marshall. At the bar, he is despotic and cares little for his colleagues or adversaries, as if they were men of wood. He has certainly much the advantage of any of them in forensic show. Give him time, and he will deliver a speech which any man might be proud to claim.
So he's not ready for prime time yet, is what he's saying about the current Attorney General of the United States.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But for his own part, and, even though he's kind of bad-mouthing Pinckney, he also says in his first appearance before the Supreme Court, Wirt found himself wanting and asserted afterwards that, quote, I must somehow or other contrive to get another case in that court, that I may show them I can do better. So he's wanting to prove himself.
Yeah. He's eager. He's rearing to go.
Yeah. Now, spoiler alert, he would have that opportunity and many more as we will discuss. But when this initial court hearing was postponed, Wirt used the opportunity in early 1815 to meet with political leaders in the nation's capital. He was really starting to hobnob with some prominent leaders. That may come to help him in the not-too-distant future. Meanwhile, in early 1816, the Wirts moved, quote, to a new, larger home in Richmond, located on the northwest corner of Main and 5th Streets, midway between the Gamble residence and the Wirts house on Shockoe Hill. Now, Elizabeth had done the research and negotiated the sale, which would be paid for through the sale of lots that had been given to the Wirts by Elizabeth's parents. And this new house, trying to separate Wirt's legal practice from household operations, it had a separate entrance to his law office, thus allowing him to divide that work from the household space.
Lovely.
And hopefully it also had a view of, the chicken plucking and lamb shearing and, slaughtering and all of that.
And that's key. You gotta oversee those operations.
Yes. Now, Elizabeth intended to expand the household production activity with this new larger home. And that year, they brought the total number of people they enslaved to 9 people. But for the first time, all of those that they enslaved were housed outside of the main house. That domain was for the family alone. And so this reflects that increasing paranoia of what might be done. What might they do to us?
Yeah.
Now, 1816 also allowed Wirt an opportunity to further establish himself as a writer, because Wirt had begun a biography of Patrick Henry in 1805, but soon abandoned the project. He was kind of busy around that point, moving to Richmond, defending murderers, defending Burr in the treason trial. He was busy.
Big times.
But he tried again in 1810, but he wasn't able to get its completion at that point. But around the time they were moving into their new home, and you have to imagine, they're moving boxes in, and he's like, oh, that's right. I was working on that biography. Maybe I should finish that.
Why not?
The things you find in a move.
Yeah.
And so he actually did finish it, and it hit the shelves that fall. This was intended as the first of a series of biographies of the Founding Fathers, but spoiler alert, Wirt would never find the time to work on the rest of the series. This would be the only book that would come out. And the reviews on it were mixed. And Howard, you're going to love this because John Adams was one of his harshest critics.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Adams wrote to Wirt, wrote to the author himself, because this is John Adams.
Of course.
He wrote that, quote, your sketches of the life of Mr. Henry have given me a rich entertainment. If I could go back to the age of 35, I would endeavor to become your rival, not in elegance of composition, but in a simple narration of facts, supported by records, histories, and testimonies of irrefragable authority.
Whoa. Well, can't even frag them.
Can't even frag them. I read this and I was like, oh my gosh, John Adams. Yes.
How is Wirt, just think how Wirt's feeling reading this stomachly.
Well, and so I will go ahead and say, with Adams, he objected to the fact that Wirt, in hoisting Henry up on the pedestal of the Revolution, he kind of downplayed the role of folks in other colonies like, say, Massachusetts. No, it was just all Patrick Henry. And John Adams was like, sir, no.
If I were younger, I would. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that, John Adams was known for writing in the margins of his books and, maybe arguing with the author in that sort of way of these old texts. But he's like, hey, this guy's still alive. I'm just going to write to him. Let him know what I think.
Yeah. He wasn't writing in the margins. He's like, I'm just going to write directly to him and give him a piece of my mind.
Oh, I love it.
And to Wirt's credit, he wrote back to Adams and said, as Glassner described it, quote, that he may have been too lavish in crediting the Virginian, i.e. Henry, for such a major role in the Revolution. So he kind of admitted, yeah, I did kind of talk him up too much. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. In the spirit of Harlow Giles Unger, you write a biography of somebody and you're going to focus on them. Maybe fall in love with them even.
Yeah. And maybe, ignore some facts and, really play up some things.
You got to do what you got to do.
You got to do what you got. He's trying, he's got the series in mind. He's got to get people hooked with the first book.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he'll come back and write a biography of somebody else like John Adams, and somehow he will now be the hero of the Revolution.
Yeah, somehow John Adams, during, the trial for the Boston Massacre soldiers, said, give me liberty or give me death. Who knew it was that?
Yeah, it was really Adams all along, at least in this biography.
Yeah. Yes, yes. Each of them he credits with saying that quote that possibly he made up, I believe. But what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. Now, as noted by Glassner, quote, although the book was much criticized at the time it was published, and it is now conceded very little authority in what it says of Henry's life and times, it initiated a kind of historical writing which was almost wholly new. So it at least got people interested in history and, started folks writing about history. So at least it was an inspiration.
There you go.
Now, Wirt's longtime friend and benefactor, President James Madison, would also help to advance his career by appointing Wirt as U.S. District Attorney for Virginia in 1816. Now, Wirt had actually written to Madison recommending for the post Abel P. Upshur, one of his legal proteges in Virginia, and someone who will get his own seat at the table episode in the future. But imagine his surprise when 3 days after he wrote this glowing letter for Upshur, Madison wrote Wirt offering him the post as district attorney. And after the customary declarations, quote, that there is nothing in the office which excites any solicitude on my part to possess it, Wirt, of course, accepted the post. And as noted by Glassner, the position, quote, was not considered a full-time job in the early 1800s. Like many government jobs at that time, it did not pay well. Office holders were expected to make a living in some other manner or be independently wealthy. And given that Wirt was already in Richmond, this meant he didn't have to move and he'd be able to carry on his private legal practice without missing a beat. But he's at least got some steady income coming in. And, it's nice to be able to say I was a district attorney.
Yep. He's inching closer,
He is. September 1816 also saw Wirt being, quote, awarded an honorary degree of Doctor of Laws from the College of New Jersey, the institution that we now know of as Princeton. And given that this was President Madison's alma mater, Glassner speculates that Madison may have played a role in arranging this honor for his protege.
Yeah, I feel like I don't feel like Wirt's ever been to New Jersey, but
No, he hasn't made it there yet, but they were like, oh, sure, yeah. With the changing of the guard in the president's mansion, Wirt still found a person with whom he was familiar as chief executive because it was finally time for James Monroe. It was his turn.
There you go.
But there was a little bit of bad blood between them because in his letters of the British spy in 1803, Wirt had written of Monroe that he had, quote, a mind neither rapid nor rich.
Ooh, that's hard to come back from.
Yeah, and apparently Monroe bore a grudge because even after he assumed the presidency, he wrote in a letter in early August 1817 to George Hay about his recent travel, asserting that it could not, quote, correspond with the dullness and slothful operation of faculties imputed to me by Mr. Wirt. I've been particularly hurt by that allegation against me from so respectable a quarter, because I candidly think that if I have any marked feature of character, it is that of promptitude in any and all situations in which I have been or may be placed.
Okay. Well, I am rapid. I'm very rapid.
I'm the most rapid.
William. Yeah. Nobody's rapider than me.
Nobody's rapider than me. I'll show you. And rich, I'm the richest.
I'm so rich in my promptitude.
In my promptitude. Yeah, so I mean, this is like over a decade later, he is still upset about that.
Yeah.
But it does seem that the president had to admit to Wirt's talent because in October 1817, just prior to the publication of his biography of Patrick Henry, Monroe asked Wirt to serve as U.S. Attorney General to succeed Richard Rush, who had been nominated as U.S. Minister to Britain. As you can expect, Elizabeth is not in favor of this move. She's like, we just got settled. I've got the window right where I want to see all the household operations.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. And she warned him that it would offer him and his family, quote, no solid profit or advantage. But before her objections could reach him, Wirt had already written to her that, quote, "The die is cast. I've accepted the office." I would not want to be in the room when they have that discussion.
Well, here's the good news, Elizabeth. You get to decorate a new house.
Yeah, period. You get to decorate a new house. Wirt tried to reassure his wife that despite the move to Washington, as he would not have to give up his private law practice or, quote, his investments in the Virginia coal fields, he had, quote, no doubt of bettering the situation of our dear children by the move. He's like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, now he's saying, won't someone think of the children?
Won't someone think of the children? But Elizabeth expressed that she was, quote, exceedingly low in spirits about the prospect of moving. But whatever she thought of it, the move was coming. So the Wirts moved from Richmond to Washington, D.C. in late 1817 so that the 46-year-old William could assume his new role as Attorney General on November 13th in a recess appointment that was subsequently confirmed by the Senate on December 15th when they were back in session. And it seems that William proceeded there first with the family following. Elizabeth was still like, yeah, I'm going to need some time.
Yeah, she's back there celebrating her 21st birthday.
Yeah. She's like, I planned this entire party. Come on. I knew you weren't going to plan it. William initially thought of renting or boarding, but Elizabeth insisted that they purchase a home in order for her to continue with her household production plans. She's like, yeah, that's not changing. We're going to be, processing meat and, plucking chickens and all of that. Thus, they purchased a home on the south side of G Street on President's Hill that was a short walk from the executive mansion. You got to, Monroe, you want to stop in and see our production? Come on.
Yeah. How's it going, Monroe? Yeah. Want some jelly?
Do you want some jelly? Don't ask what type. We hope you like the foot jelly.
With a name like Wirt's. Yeah, it's gotta be good.
It's gotta be good. So this home was actually owned by Tobias Lear, who longtime listeners of the podcast might remember as George Washington's private secretary and a diplomat in service in the Jefferson administration. Now, William had to take out loans to pay for the home, as well as, quote, the two lots that made up the rest of the block for $13,800. So, pretty penny.
That's something.
As part of their preparations, Elizabeth made plans to sell 3 of the 6 people that they enslaved at that time in order to have money to hire white servants in Washington. Not good. But turning to his actual new position when he took up his new post, as noted by Glassner, quote, Wirt quickly discovered that previous occupants of the office had wandered far from the job description as defined by Congress, and that little had been done to record and preserve past decisions by the Attorney General. That's kind of important.
Yeah. Record keeping is good. So he gets Elizabeth in there to start being the Assistant Attorney General.
I know you're pregnant and you got your, meat processing plant going on, but I need you to be Assistant Attorney General. Yeah. So Wirt took it upon himself to, quote, reorganize the office on a professional basis and set policies that existed well into the 20th century.
Nice.
So he's already making an impact. And Glassner notes that Wirt's close political and personal relationship with President Monroe meant that he was more of, quote, a full-fledged member of the cabinet in a way his predecessors had not been. Now, I do have some questions about that, and we'll talk a little more about that as we go along, but the post of Attorney General at this point, there was no Justice Department. It was just the Attorney General. And so It wasn't like the other cabinet posts, but we'll talk more about that.
All right.
In terms of his new colleagues in the cabinet, historian James Traub notes that Secretary of State John Quincy Adams got on well with Attorney General William Wirt, and he was described as, quote, a big, shambling figure, warm and bookish, who had no ambitions beyond his current job and was inclined, so far as Adams could tell, to give way to Monroe on almost everything.
Okay. Mostly complimentary.
Mostly complimentary. I'm not sure how complimentary shambling is.
Yeah, but he's warm. He's a warm shambling man because you don't want a cold shambler.
You don't want a cold shambler.
And I feel like bookish coming from John Quincy Adams is pretty good.
Yeah, that's a compliment.
Yeah.
Now, Wirt wrote about his new role to a friend in January 1818, asserting that, quote, since I've been here, I've had to work till midnight every night to keep the channel of my office from being blocked up by driftwood, which is an interesting description.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like those were actually Gouverneur Morris's last words.
I love it. Yes. Yeah. No, you don't want it blocked up by driftwood. Nope.
No, you want to clear the channel.
Clear the channel.
Sometimes you got to stay up late sometimes to clear it.
Even if it takes until midnight. Yes.
Yes.
Now, like I said, at the time, the Attorney General had no staff, and it wouldn't be until the Grant administration that the Justice Department was created. However, Wirt also shared with a friend that, quote, I've been long convinced that there is not enough iron in my composition for a public character. I mean, for a politician aiming for glory. Nor would I have accepted any other office under the government, even the highest. So he's like, this one's kind of a good fit. I like to work. I like the law. I can clear the channel.
Yeah. There's, I got to get rid of this wood because I don't have enough iron.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Wirt's main complaint about the office was the pay, but he was at least able to get his salary raised from $1,500 as it had been under his predecessor to $3,500 annually. But this would still be a stretch for the family to live off of. And as noted by historian Chase Mooney, quote, Wirt, who had a large family, found it difficult to live in Washington on his salary. Government practice meant a great decrease of income from his private practice. Wirt's hints of resigning led Monroe to ask Crawford and Adams whether he should, by special message, recommend an increase for all heads of departments. Both agreed he should not. Any such measure should be spontaneous on the part of Congress. So they're like, no, you shouldn't advocate for your people. That's crazy talk.
Let Congress spontaneously decide to pay them more.
Because, of course, Congress does that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they'll vote themselves a raise too, but, who's counting?
Right.
And if this economic quandary wasn't enough, you also had the Panic of 1819. So, great time to be bringing in less money. But it seems like in order to supplement his income, Wirt devoted time to expanding his private legal practice and would ultimately, quote, spend up to 10 months of the year traveling to courts in Baltimore, Annapolis, Richmond, Philadelphia, and even Boston.
Wow. And this is while he's Attorney General.
This is while he's Attorney General.
10 months. Now, there are 12 months, I believe, in a year. That's a lot. That's a lot of time.
That's a lot.
So, yeah, during the 2 months of the year he's there, I could understand maybe having to work until midnight sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really happening.
Catching up on 10 months worth of stuff on your desk.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, back then it was tough. You couldn't really, the Wi-Fi was terrible for one, but you couldn't really work on your laptop on a horse.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bouncing all the time. You end up sending gibberish in your emails.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, as described by Jabbour, his regular pattern during his time in the cabinet was as follows. Quote, January through March were spent in Washington at the Supreme Court, April at the Federal District Court in Baltimore, and June and July at the Maryland Court of Appeals at Annapolis. After a vacation in August, William returned to Baltimore for the District Court for the months of September, October, and November. He divided December between the Maryland Court of Appeals at Annapolis, the Federal District Court at Baltimore, and preparing for the upcoming session of the Supreme Court in Washington.
Okay, so maybe he's a little busy.
He's a little busy, but with appearances before the U.S. Supreme Court and other federal courts, as well as providing written opinions for the government with fees up to $100 per opinion.
Oh, I wish somebody would do that for me.
I know, right? I'll give you my opinion for $100.
A penny for my thoughts? Oh, no.
No. We're going up.
Yeah.
We've got inflation to think of.
It's true.
But Wirt was able to work out an annual income of around $10,000. But he is definitely working for it.
Yes.
Yeah. While Wirt's biographer Glassner asserts that, quote, Wirt is accorded the distinction of being the first Attorney General to participate actively in government decisions as a member of the President's cabinet, I think this falsely insinuates that his predecessors had no role to play as a counsel to the President. And listeners, we've seen in other Seat at the Table series episodes, this was not the case with previous Attorneys General, though the extent of their influence and involvement with affairs of the administration was sometimes a mixed bag. I would say it's more accurate to say that Wirt was the first to be systematically and on a consistent basis involved in decisions made by the presidential administration. They made sure to loop him in and invite him to meetings, but to say he was the first to really participate is just not the case.
Right. Others, it was more on a as-needed basis, would you say?
Exactly. It was more, well, we really want your opinion, or, I just need a fresh set of eyes on this. But he was, systematically brought in.
Wirt was always on the group text.
He was on the group text.
Okay.
But remember that annual pattern, all the travel and all that, only being in Washington for 2 months of the year.
Yeah, January through March.
Yeah. Just schedule all the meetings for the year in January through March. I'll be there. But it's not surprising that his, quote, extensive private law practice caused him, i.e. Wirt, to miss many cabinet meetings. Again, Wi-Fi was terrible. Quote, John Quincy Adams noted in his diary that between 1821 and 1828, Wirt missed 57 cabinet meetings for reasons other than illness.
Wow, what an anal guy.
The fact that, and you can imagine like John Quincy Adams just sitting there like ticking off, he missed another meeting.
Yeah, now I get, I love JQA, as you know. But I just wonder what the impetus was for, you know what? I'm going to add all those up right now.
And put it in my diary.
Yeah, I wonder what the total is.
It is a JQA thing to do. Now, of course, while William was dealing with his government and legal business, Elizabeth was left to run the household in Washington. As Jabbour described, quote, left alone at home for the majority of each year, Elizabeth struggled with increasing difficulty to maintain her authority over her staff of rebellious slaves and proud servants. Her new responsibilities as a Washington hostess also detracted from her productive activities within the household. When you're expected to host parties and stuff, maybe the meat processing goes to the wayside.
Yeah, that sounds like some drama.
Yeah. Still, she had times that she would assert herself, and by assert herself, I mean selling off a young woman named Mary, who she enslaved when Mary didn't show Elizabeth what she felt was her due level of respect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And the mixing of free and enslaved labor in the household sometimes caused issues as well, with one hired servant demanding that he be, quote, given a better room and a slave to clean it.
I don't like it.
No, this is not. No, nothing good about this.
Mm-mm.
But back to Wirt being Attorney General. Early in his tenure, Wirt was asked to give his opinion on a legal question that has come up time and again in the late 20th and early 21st century.
Ooh, that's ours.
Because President Monroe was subpoenaed on January 3rd, 1818, quote, to give testimony in the naval court-martial of Dr. William P.C. Barden, a surgeon at the Philadelphia Naval Hospital, charged with conduct unbecoming an officer. So Monroe is like, Wirt, what do I legally have to do here? Because I am being subpoenaed. The Attorney General did have to admit that, quote, on the basic question of whether the president could be forced to appear in court against his will, Wirt said that the federal courts had never expressed an opinion. So he's like, it's not really clear. So Wirt recommended that Monroe, quote, give the judge advocate a respectful answer while pleading a conflict of government duties which would prevent him from appearing at a trial in Philadelphia. So basically he told him, go ahead and sidestep the question. You're president. They're not going to force you.
Respectfully, no.
Respectfully, no. I am too busy. Signed, the president, ! Underline.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I already did like a big old tour. I don't know if you heard about that, guys. Done with the traveling. So XOXO. Roll.
You should have gotten on my tour schedule.
Yes. Check my website to see when I'll next be appearing in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Maybe I'll swing back by when I release my next album. Who knows?
Yes. I'm opening for Lafayette and Pittsburgh. Yeah.
So on March 27th, 1818, Wirt wrote to the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee about the issues that he found upon assuming office, quote, in the past operation of the Attorney General's office. Now, while not blaming his predecessors, Wirt noted a lack of, quote, a law making continuity the policy of the government. He also criticized the practice of, quote, everyone from congressmen, everyone, from congressmen down to customs collectors, routinely calling on the Attorney General for opinions that he, by law, was not permitted to give. Wirt was very much, he was like, I'm looking everywhere, and it doesn't say that, Joe the custom collector can come in and ask me a legal question.
Fair.
Without, of course, me charging $100.
Yes.
I'll give him my opinion then. And Wirt also requested, quote, copies of the laws of individual states.
Oh, that's a bit much to ask for, I think.
I know. All of them? I mean,
yeah.
Why do you need the laws of Rhode Island? It's Rhode Island. Oh, you really like that maritime law? Yeah. But yeah, this and what I'm about to say is it really puts into perspective the position of Attorney General was nothing like what we think of it nowadays. Because in April, Congress provided Wirt with, quote, an official Attorney General's office in the Treasury building and a clerk with an annual salary of $1,000.
Was he just working from home before this?
Or I'm just picturing him like on a park bench or something.
Yeah. A park bench driven by a horse?
Yeah. He really is on his horse trying to write out legal briefs. Yeah. But in May, they went a step further, providing him with, quote, a $500 contingency fund for the office, as well as a writing desk and chair for the clerk, a map stand, 2 book presses, 6 extra chairs, 2 washstands, a small table, and a water pitcher, and glasses.
Glasses? Oh, to drink out of. Okay.
Yeah.
Not to see.
you didn't have to just turn the pitcher up into your mouth.
Oh man, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So after 3 decades of this office being in existence, the government finally provided the Attorney General with a desk and an office.
And the next morning, he grabbed a washboard and he did a performance from Falstaff in that office.
He was celebrating. Somebody walks in, the Attorney General is in his underwear. Yeah.
Yes. The most notable performance until Janet Reno. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It was just like reading this. It was like, oh my gosh, this is surreal, but it speaks volumes.
Yeah. No, they kept track of things.
Yeah. So, in addition to getting his water pitcher, May of 1818 saw Wirt go to Baltimore in his first attempt to seek business with cases being brought before the U.S. Circuit Court there. He also gained entrance to the Maryland bar, despite the fact that since he resided in the District of Columbia, he technically was not a state resident. But who was going to tell the Attorney General that he couldn't join the Maryland bar?
Yeah, I feel like once you're Attorney General, you should get a license in every state.
Yeah. Even Rhode Island, you can catch up on maritime law.
Yeah. I mean, as long as he got the list of laws of the state, he's good to go.
He's good to go. I have it right here. Yeah. Now, he was, quote, exempted from the stringent regulations of the Maryland bar on the grounds that his official duty entitled him to that privilege in cases involving the government. So he's not a resident. He's getting exemptions, but he's still got access. And this would allow Wirt to, quote, build up a lucrative law practice in his native state.
I mean, this is a man he's got a doctorate from New Jersey at this point. So I feel like borders don't apply to William Wirt.
No. Now, he would receive some criticism for this from political opponents in Congress about using his federal office for personal gain in his private practice. But ultimately, nothing would come of that. It was just, they were talking, but they didn't do anything. Wirt would also have an opportunity to put his writing skills to work on behalf of the administration in 1818. Because in the midst of the kerfuffle over Andrew Jackson's invasion of Florida, one of those things that Andrew Jackson loves to do, and we discussed in the John Quincy Adams episode, we'll discuss in John C. Calhoun's upcoming Seat at the Table episode, Andrew Jackson just loves to invade Florida. And so, yeah, it's what you do. So Wirt was tasked with ghostwriting an article to be published in the National Intelligencer, quote, that laid out the administration's position. So he's the front person for here's what really happened. So Howard, on June 20th, 1818, Elizabeth gave birth to a son named Henry, who would finally prove to be her last child.
Okay.
At the age of 23, she is finally done with having children.
Yes.
for nearly 2 decades. Yeah. And with William away for long stretches, Elizabeth was clearly stressed with having to maintain the household and raise children. She implored her husband to return home to help. He did not. Yeah. So, in late 1818, while both were appearing as legal counsel before a court in Baltimore as part of the Baltimore piracy trials, Howard, here we go. We've got piracy.
Here we go. I'm ready. Yes.
Former Attorney General William Pinckney, so the guy who got the post that he wanted and was his now predecessor. So Pinckney insulted Wirt's reputation, quote, in front of the assembled court, and the dispute nearly resulted in a duel.
Wow. Attorney General on Attorney General?
I mean, it's a showdown, and we've got piracy to boot. This is awesome. But it was only averted by an apology from Pinckney. And Wirt's handling of the situation enhanced his prestige in the city, but it did not raise his standing with his wife, who was opposed to dueling in general on religious grounds and was utterly frightened at the thought of losing her husband, the father of her children, the breadwinner, in such a way. As she wrote, quote, "Oh, thought of horror and frenzy. Have I been so near to being desolate?" She's like, "Get it together, man. No, we need you."
At this point, did the family move to DC?
Yeah, so they were in DC.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's when he's like, oh, you know what? Thank you for moving here for this job. 10 months out of the year, I'm not going to be here now.
Yeah. But enjoy your new home. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for moving here with me so that you can not be with me.
Yeah. 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 Elizabeth was not happy at this point. And understandably so.
He finally gets a job like that should be anchored to a place.
And he's not.
No.
But this is also the time, and 1819 was a big year for him because he got involved with two key Supreme Court cases of the early Republic. Now, the first case stemmed from the establishment of the Second Bank of the United States at the end of Madison's presidency. When the National Bank established a branch in Baltimore, realizing that it posed a threat to the business of existing state-chartered banks, the Maryland state legislature, quote, levied a heavy tax on the notes issued by the National Bank branch operating within the state. But the Bank of the United States saw this as illegal as it threatened federal sovereignty over the states. Like, you can't tax the federal government, Maryland, and thus they refused to pay and took the case to court.
And William Wirt was both the prosecutor and the defense.
And earning a pretty penny from doing both.
Yes.
And would you like me, one of you Supreme Court justices, if you want me to fill in, I can, I'll charge a fee, but, I can do all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and during recesses, I will be selling my opinions in the cafeteria.
Yeah, see me? I've got a table set up outside. Yeah. Now, this matter started in the state court system, and the Maryland Court of Appeals upheld the state's viewpoint in the matter. Thus, the bank appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Given his role as Attorney General, Wirt joined the case to represent the federal government's interest and found himself joining with former Attorney General William Pinckney and former Representative Daniel Webster in representing the plaintiff's side. And ultimately, the Supreme Court would rule in favor of the bank having authority to operate in the state of Maryland, and that the state government had no authority to interfere with bank operations. So this was a big case for that federal-state relationship. And the second case stemmed from an action taken by the New Hampshire state legislature to abolish Dartmouth College's pre-revolutionary charter in order for the state to assume control of the college. Now, won't go into all the details, but Daniel Webster was involved with this one as well. He represented the plaintiff in this case. Wirt would serve on the defense. Now, though Wirt was committed for his arguments, ultimately the Supreme Court ruled that the U.S. Constitution forbid states from interfering with contract obligations and that the Revolution had not dissolved the Charter of Dartmouth, thus guaranteeing its independence. So they're like, a government can't just come in and say, oh, well, this charter, this agreement isn't valid.
Yeah, so it seems a little anti-states' rights in a way, these two cases.
Yeah, this is definitely building up more federal authority in both of them.
Yeah.
So all this is going on. He's got these prominent cases he's a part of. He's traveling all over the place. He's selling his opinions. He's doing all of this. In April 1819, while Wirt was away from home, one of the people that the Wirts enslaved, named Frederick, took up a knife and a pistol and joined with two other men enslaved by their neighbors, quote, and escaped to Baltimore, where the three runaways were apprehended, jailed, and recovered, coming when it did at a time when rumors that, quote, a widespread slave rebellion might be underway. Elizabeth was frantic and wrote to William urging him to return to Washington. It didn't seem that he did until his business in Richmond was concluded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wirt's got a Wirt.
He does. He's like, I understand. You're worried. You're there by yourself. But I've got a couple of cases to take care of. I'm sorry. It's for the children.
Yeah. What are the odds another one of the people we enslave is going to take up a knife? You know?
Yeah. I mean, now it's happened, so you're okay. It's fine.
Yeah, and there's one less knife in the house. So it's just unlikely at this point.
Yeah. I mean, how many knives do we have, really? You know, come on.
Right.
You're good.
I mean, we do run a slaughterhouse in our courtyard.
But, you know, it's fine.
Yeah.
Those aren't those kind of knives. No. The murder knife is gone.
Yes. Everything's totally fine. Let me just finish up some stuff here in Richmond.
Yeah. Now, in the midst of his other responsibilities as Attorney General, the personal issues with his family, his private practice, Wirt also got involved in the debate over the president's powers with the Slave Trade Act of 1819. As described by historian Chase C. Mooney in his biography of William H. Crawford, quote, Attorney General Wirt said no part of the $100,000 appropriated to carry out the Act of 1819 could be used to purchase land on the coast of Africa or anywhere else for settlement purposes, to transport either freedmen or illegally imported persons, to buy carpenter's tools or other materials for making a settlement, or to transport or pay the salary of an agent, because the second section limits the appointment expressly to a proper person or persons residing on the coast of Africa. So this was at a time in this idea of colonization. You know, if we are to get rid of slavery, if we are to emancipate folks, they really need to go to Africa. They need to recolonize Africa. And so this was part of that practice, but Wirt was like, no, what you're trying to plan for this and what the law actually says you can do are two completely different things. But then Crawford talked with Wirt and changed his mind about it. So it's like, okay, just do whatever you want. I don't care. You know what? I've got business in Baltimore. You just handle it. Hey, you paid your $100 for my opinion.
Yeah, Crawford's pretty shambling too. You know, he's a big guy. I'm not sure I know what shambling means, but I imagine it means you better look out.
Yeah, you better look out. Just Crawford, do whatever you want. It's fine.
Yeah.
Now, 1820 saw Wirt involved in the Monroe administration's deliberations over the Missouri Compromise. In early March, Monroe charged the cabinet with providing written responses on whether it was constitutional for Congress to prohibit slavery in territories, and, if so, did such a prohibition continue on when the territory became a state. Now, while the cabinet agreed that Congress could prohibit slavery in a territory, Wirt, along with his fellow Southerners, Treasury Secretary Crawford and War Secretary John C. Calhoun, did not feel that Congress could prohibit slavery in a state. So there's that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the Missouri Compromise would go through, allowing Maine to join the Union as a free state, Missouri to join as a slave state, and a limit of slavery to be established at the 36 degree 30 latitude, which was the southern border of Missouri. But it's clear the sectional divide is growing, and Wirt is on the southern side. Meanwhile, Wirt was asked in late 1820 to intervene in an issue President Monroe was having with the two U.S. senators from Illinois, Jesse Thomas and Wirt's old childhood friend, Ninian Edwards. I told you he would be coming back. So though the two were both Democratic Republicans, they both had their own respective bases of support in Illinois, and thus were trying to influence Monroe's appointment of land office officials in the state. And so this whole appointment thing, it is a headache for presidents for decades to come. Everybody's scrambling. Oh no, you've got to get in my person. Here's the right person for the job, because they're trying to be seen as, hey, I got this job for you. And you've got these two senators from the same state duking it out of, no, he's going to appoint my people. No, he's going to appoint my people. And Monroe was like, look, Wirt, Edwards, just get him to back off. And so Wirt, I'm imagining while he's riding from, Baltimore to Richmond on the horse, he's writing to Edwards, hey, just tone it down a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 1820, Wirt's oldest son, Robert, began his studies at West Point. However, he would not finish his education there, for in December 1821, Robert was the, quote, ringleader of a student rebellion at West Point and was thus sent home. Upon his return, Robert began to suffer from an illness, which some physicians said was a problem with his liver, while others thought it was a lung ailment. Robert was also deeply depressed, which you would be if your future was in shambles and your doctors couldn't agree on what's wrong with you. In December 1822, William accompanied Robert to Philadelphia to consult with Dr. Philip Physick. And yes, that is a real name, Dr. Physick.
Yes. Love him. Yep.
Yes. So Dr. Physick pronounced that Robert was likely to recover. And so William left him there at a boarding house as he returned to Washington to appear before the Supreme Court, because he wasn't going to let his ailing son get in the way of him appearing before the court. No. During the winter session of the Supreme Court in 1820 leading into 1821, Wirt began to suffer from, quote, dizziness and fainting spells due to overwork. As he wrote to a friend around the time, quote, the court keeps me constantly engaged till 4 o'clock. I had then to hasten home to dinner and immediately afterwards to sit down to my papers till 10, 11, and 12 at night. Then up again at 3 or 4 in the morning, and with merely time enough to take breakfast off as rapidly as my carriage would drive me to the Capitol at 11. So the Supreme Court term lasted for 6 weeks, but Wirt refused to slow down during that time. In his writing during this point in his life, we see that he was gravely concerned about his debt and felt that only by continuing and expanding his legal practice would he ever get out of it. Elizabeth took it upon herself a role to decrease household expenditures and increase any profit she could from household production. But it doesn't seem that William felt that was the key to getting them out of debt. He was like, I've got to do this. I've got to just keep going, keep doing, become a bigger lawyer, expand my practice, and then we will have enough money. In 1822, when he received a demand for immediate repayment of a nearly $2,000 loan, William wrote to Elizabeth admonishing her for her constant calls for him to stay at home more, asserting that, quote, how should I have been able to meet these bank runs without my Baltimore legal practice? So he's just like, I'm the one who's going to solve this. Just stop bugging me. Now, despite this overwork, I mean, he has nothing going on, right? He's just sitting there twiddling his thumbs. Yeah, he's bored. So he makes time to mentor young proteges, running what his biographer Glassner describes as, quote, his own informal school for would-be lawyers. He, i.e. Wirt, had so many applicants that in 1821, he drew up a set of regulations designed to weed out all but the most dedicated. The hours of study were listed as 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the summer and 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the winter. When not in court, Wirt made himself available during these hours to answer questions. And Wirt would end up mentoring 3 people who will get their own episodes in this series. So we mentioned Abel Upshur, but also John Pendleton Kennedy, who, in addition to writing a biography of Wirt, would serve as Secretary of the Navy under Millard Fillmore, and The most famous of the three, Salmon P. Chase, who would be named Secretary of the Treasury, then Chief Justice of the Supreme Court by Abraham Lincoln. So these three folks are part of Wirt's legacy.
Wow.
Yeah. And though Chase was passionately anti-slavery, he called the enslaver William Wirt, quote, one of the purest and noblest of men.
All right.
So reflecting back on his over 4 years thus far in office as Attorney General, Wirt on January 17, 1822, wrote to St. George Tucker that, quote, I have never been a lazy man, but I never knew what work was till I came to Washington. I cannot find time to read anything, not even the newspaper regularly, and I know little of what is going on in the world out of the sphere of my own operations. I probably make my life more laborious than it need to be, but all the difficult questions of the departments are thrown upon me. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're probably making it a little harder on yourself than you have to.
Yeah, it's like in my spare time, I'm going to start, Professor Xavier's School for Mutants, Why not?
Yeah. I mean, I've got like 5 minutes here that I'm not doing anything, so
Yeah.
I don't need sleep.
No.
Now, and he goes on and he's talking about, all these difficult questions of the department are thrown upon me. The main current of their duties is so constant and so great that if they were to take time to think, it would overwhelm them. So whatever requires thinking is thrown upon the Attorney General. He's thinking for the entire government.
Yeah. He is the think tank.
He is the think tank. And the stress of his position was clearly getting to him, as early 1822 would find Wirt sick and knocked out of commission by fever. Now, while he would ultimately recover, another key figure in Wirt's life would not. His rival, William Pinckney, finally passed away on February 25th, 1822, and not from the bullet from a duel. They never got that duel. But Wirt was asked to take up Pinckney's role as representative for insurance companies making claims to the Commission on Spanish Claims, a job that Wirt took up to increase his income and possibly figuratively dance on Pinckney's grave. Ha ha, this is mine now.
And is he still Attorney General at this point?
He's still Attorney General.
And he's just taking on more jobs?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I know. It makes us feel bad, What are we doing?
Yeah.
This guy's in court like 24/7.
Yeah, and then now at night he's doing commercials for Allstate? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. So when the cabinet met to discuss Monroe's annual message in late 1823, quote, William Wirt and Samuel Southard, old friends of the president's, contributed little to the first meeting or the half dozen that followed. However, he was probably tired at this point. He's like, I just got in from Baltimore. just talk. I'm just going to close my eyes for a bit.
Is this from JQA's diary? Like, Wirt didn't say much today.
This is the 5th meeting in a row he hasn't said much. He only talked for 3.2 minutes. But Wirt would express his disagreement with an early, more forceful draft of the section added at the behest of Secretary of State Adams, which would develop the policy now known as the Monroe Doctrine. Wirt called it, quote, a hornet of a paragraph, and warned that, quote, the country would not support the government in a war for the independence of South America.
I just want to say, I love Wirt's metaphors. He's always reaching for natural things like wood, iron, hornets, yeah.
He has a way with words. Now, Monroe and Adams did take Wirt's objections into consideration and ultimately softened the language before the final version was sent over. So, in 1823, Elizabeth worked to reduce their expenses by letting go some of their household servants. Now, it wasn't specified here, but it seemed like this was in reference to the actual paid servants rather than the people they enslaved. which makes letting them go a bit different.
Yeah, and it's a different financial thing. Like, if you let go the paid ones, you don't have to pay them anymore. If you let go the enslaved ones, you get paid.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, by this time, Elizabeth was getting older, and she struggled to take up some of the labor that had previously been done by those servants. And meanwhile, while she's focused on the household, William was one who liked the comforts of life. As described by Glassner, quote, he, Wirt, remained fond of snuff, cigars, and good wine. In his home, Wirt kept generous supplies of whiskey and wine. He was particularly fond of Sicilian vintages and complained that they were not always available in the marketplaces of Richmond and the District of Columbia. A good wife, Betsy did her best to curb her husband's appetites, but it was an uphill struggle at best.
All right, yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't mind hanging out with the Wirts and, drinking some whiskey and wine.
He's worked hard all his life. It's time to enjoy the finer things.
Exactly.
While
he's also working. And hopefully he allowed Elizabeth a little time to enjoy the things of life as well, and not just work.
We'd like to think that.
We'd like to think that. So in 1824, arguing alongside Daniel Webster in the case of Gibbons v. Ogden, Wirt asserted that the state of New York did not have the right to, quote, grant exclusive rights to navigate its waters, an argument that the Supreme Court would agree with in its ruling. And it's funny how much this case keeps coming up and I'm doing some research for the vice presidency series, and I think it's come up in a couple of Seat at the Table episodes. I keep coming back to this case.
It's all about the water.
It's all about the water.
Yeah, that's basically why we have a constitution. Washington, Madison, get in the water. The movie Chinatown, it's all about the water.
It's all about the water. Yes, and we will definitely be talking about this one. It is Samuel Southard is a big one involved with this. So we'll be coming back to this in Seat at the Table before too long. So
nice.
The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. From improving emergency response times to protecting against cyber attacks, local, state, and federal governments are innovating with Google AI. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American Innovation.
But in mid-1824, William put forward the idea to Elizabeth of moving her and the household to Baltimore or New York. But Elizabeth, albeit reluctantly, opted to stay in Washington so long as, quote, we can be insured our present salary and your practice in Baltimore. And so you'll remember that was one of the things. He was able to enter the bar in Maryland, even though technically they didn't live in Maryland. But, he's Attorney General, so who's going to tell him no?
And this is so that he can practice law while also being the Attorney General?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Which it's interesting because it is one of those things at this time, we're starting to see with Wirt a little more development in the office of Attorney General, but it was still not necessarily seen as a full-time job. And so it was expected that the Attorney General would also be practicing law on their own, which nowadays we would definitely see that as a conflict of interest. But
yeah, but I get it with those little eastern states. Yeah, I grew up in Illinois. I'm in California. We got these big states. But out east, it's like there's a state right next door. Why would you have to not be able to practice there? I get it.
Yeah, you can walk down the road and you're in Maryland, so why not?
Right? You're going to tell me I can walk down the road, but I can't practice law when I get a few more steps?
Exactly. Come on, I'm nearly there. Come on.
Right?
Despite the optimistic prognosis from Dr. Physic back in late 1822 of their son Robert's eventual recovery, his illness unfortunately continued, and most of the burden for tending to his needs fell on, you guessed it, Elizabeth, because of course he was busy with his practice and drinking his whiskey and smoking his cigars. He had things that he was doing.
They're not going to smoke themselves.
They're not going to. But in late June 1824, further medical examination determined that it was an infection of the lungs that Robert was facing, and the Wirts decided that Robert should take, quote, a sea voyage to the Mediterranean, because that's what you do when you've got an infection of the lungs, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, that was a cure for everything back then. Just put them on a boat.
Just put them on a boat. So, costing around $1,000. While this was an additional and unexpected large expense, if it worked, of course, it would be worth it. And, I think any parent would say, yes, if my child needs anything, I'll figure out how to get the money. Just do it.
Sure.
Sadly, the journey would not cure him. And in late December 1824, the Wirts learned of Robert's death. One of many tragedies that Wirts had in his life, but that's a particularly tough one.
So he died at sea?
Yeah. So he never made it home. Yeah. But 1825 was a year that brought many expenses for the Wirts as they prepared for their daughter's debuts into society. Elizabeth complained that, quote, there is no end to our expenses. However, they thought that establishing their daughters with husbands from the upper rungs of Washington society would ultimately pay off financially for the family. They need some money coming in from somewhere, and as happened at this time, why don't we get our daughters married off to some rich folks?
Yeah, that's how you do it.
That's how you do it. Now, 1825 also brought a change for Wirt, as, of course, our listeners know, and Howard, I know you're very familiar. President Monroe prepared for retirement, and after the disputed 1824 presidential election was settled in his favor in February, John Quincy Adams prepared to assume office as the sixth U.S. president. Now, having worked with them for a number of years, Adams opted to retain much of Monroe's cabinet, including Wirt.
Didn't he learn from his daddy's mistakes?
You would think.
You want your own cabinet, but if somebody's good at what they do and you get along, I get it.
Yeah. I know. And he, we talked about this on Crawford's episode. He did offer Crawford the position of Treasury Secretary. And thankfully, and again, that would have been a disaster. I mean, Crawford was already messing up things for Monroe. It's like him and JQA especially didn't get along. So that would have been a disaster. Thankfully, he had the good sense to say no.
Yeah, like Monroe didn't actually hit Crawford with the fire tongs. I think JQA might have.
I think he probably would have at multiple times. But Wirt, he gets along with him. He's like, okay, you can stay. So now, making arguments on behalf of the federal government in the Antelope case before the Supreme Court in early 1825, Wirt argued against the enslaved Africans involved in the case to be returned to the Spanish and Portuguese who were claiming ownership of them. In his arguments, Wirt asserted that, quote, slavery was introduced among us during our colonial state, against the solemn remonstrances of our legislative assemblies. Free Americans did not introduce it. It is a calamity entailed upon us by the commercial policy of the parent country. So we are bringing back that idea of, it's not really our fault. It's Britain. It's England. Blame them.
Is this a little like pre-Amistad sort of thing going on?
Yeah, so this was pre-Amistad. And this was one of the cases that they turned to in trying to build the case for Amistad. They were looking at the Antelope case as one of these test cases that had come before. And of course, this is not to say that Wirt did not see enslaved people as property, because, of course, he had people that he enslaved. But he was careful in following the letter of the law when it came to enslavement, and did not condone the illegal enslavement of individuals, such as had been the case with those involved in the Antelope matter. So this was kind of his limit. Now, 1825 also saw former President Thomas Jefferson present Wirt with an opportunity to change his career trajectory, because with the approval of the Board of Visitors, Jefferson officially offered Wirt a position as professor of the School of Law, as well as the new office of president of the University of Virginia, an offer that was exclusive to Wirt. He made it very clear, this offer is just for you. If Wirt refused it, the office would be declared null and void.
Wow.
So that speaks to how Jefferson viewed Wirt and the amount of respect that he had for him, that he went to bat, that he was willing to create this office just for him. Now, while one can imagine that Wirt at least gave a brief consideration to this prospect of, quote, a more slowly paced life in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, especially since he often mentioned his wish to return to that part of the world in his letters, Wirt ultimately declined this offer out of concern for making a good financial foundation for his wife and children. So he's really focused on, I've got to make that money for them.
Yeah, I feel like people were just like, oh, Jefferson, as much as I would love to get back there to those woods, I just can't. Like, I wonder how much of it was the financial thing and just not wanting to, because that's a bit out of the way, right?
Yeah, it's
especially
kind of in the middle of nowhere.
For someone who's become this cosmopolitan, cigar smoking, whiskey drinking, multiple job holding meat connoisseur.
He would have trouble getting his Sicilian wines in Charlottesville.
Yeah. I mean, that was Jefferson mostly spent time trying to get wine and trying to fill his university. Those were his dying hobbies, and working on the old Cadillac out back. Yeah.
Exactly.
Restoring it.
Exactly. But Wirt was like, nah, I think I'll stay here. So in his stead, John T. Lomax assumed the position of professor of law at UVA and, quote, the University of Virginia would function without a president, as Jefferson had decreed, for the remainder of the century. So it took a while before they actually got a real president. Well, and of course, 1825 is also the year, Jefferson and the other former president, John Adams, both died on Independence Day. And so Wirt was asked to deliver a eulogy for both men in the House chamber in Washington at a joint session of Congress. But as Wirt was not as familiar with Adams, he was close to Jefferson, but he really didn't know Adams that well. He requested that another speaker be chosen to eulogize Adams, but the committee organizing the memorial ceremony insisted. No, you can figure something out. It's John Adams. Just, talk about how cranky he was. It's fine.
Yeah. We're not going to sit through two speeches, okay?
No, just condense it into one. You've got this.
Yeah.
So on October 19th, Wirt delivered an over 2-hour eulogy for both Adams and Jefferson.
I want to get my hands on that and see how much of a short shrift Adams may have actually gotten.
Jefferson was an amazing guy. We had this great conversation this time, and, we could talk for hours. And John Adams was from Massachusetts, right? Right? Okay, that's right. Okay. But as the year of 1825 drew to a close, the Adams administration began to consider the president's first annual message to Congress. When he read through the initial draft, Wirt commented that, quote, it is excessively bold. There is not a line in it which I do not approve, but it would give strong hold to the party in Virginia who represents you as grasping for power. It is a noble, spirited thing, but I dread its effects on my popularity in Virginia. They will cry down as a partiality for monarchies your references to the voyages of discovery and scientific researches. And so this was the grandiose one, the lighthouses in the sky. This was, it was revolutionary, and Wirt was like, I don't think that's going to play well in Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, all Adams wanted to do was just reshape the entire government to, change the American people for the better.
Yeah. Found a national university, work towards national defense. scientific exploration, research. Yeah,
He was just ahead of his time.
he was ahead of his time. Now, while Adams did do some revisions based on Wirt's recommendations, the Attorney General would ultimately prove correct in that the annual message, which even in its final version called for numerous massive progressive improvements, including, as we mentioned, a national university, a Department of the Interior, a national observatory, and more, as a huge government overreach. And so, thus really began the Adams administration's really awful 4 years of constant fighting and constant criticism, and just, it was not a good time in Washington that 4 years. But a year after his son Robert's death found William away from home for Christmas, Elizabeth wrote to him that, quote, "This is a sad hearing indeed, that you are not to be with us even on Xmas." And she did use Xmas.
Yeah, I was surprised when I first saw that how old that abbreviation was.
She continued, "After such a long separation, to be denied that day of all days, it is a hard fate indeed. And yet our expenses have been so great that we cannot choose between labor and rest, but must drudge on, whether we will or no." William replied that, quote, "My heart sinks and my eyes feel like filling at the thought of not being able to see you even at Xmas. But I am in the track of my duty and must not quit it, however much I may groan in the spirit." So they're even saying, hey, we've got to work even on Christmas.
Yeah.
But, Wirt did try to at least take some time out for his family, because in the summer of 1826, in an attempt to reconnect with his children, Wirt took his daughters Liz, Laura, and Rosa to Virginia Springs for a getaway. However, it did not go well.
Oh.
William wrote to Elizabeth that, quote, "Without you, I cannot get along with girls. And this is the last time that I will attempt it."
Wow.
It's like, oh, you can't relate to your children? You need your wife there to serve as what? A go-between? What do you mean you don't like smoking cigars? Come on. Have you tried that Sicilian wine yet?
Yeah, that's tough if he's not getting along with all of his daughters and it's
Yeah.
just them on a trip.
Not a fun time. And this wasn't just like, a few hours in the car. This was travel in the 19th century. So.
Yeah, any travel back then was hell. So I can't imagine.
Yeah.
It's like, are we there yet? And then you just have to throw him out of the carriage.
Sorry, you gotta go.
Yeah.
But at the beginning of the year in 1828, Wirt was advised by his physician to lessen his workload, and he wrote to Elizabeth in January that he intended to do so. However, of course, because there's always a however with Wirt in trying to think about not working, with the growing concern over the possibility of an Andrew Jackson victory in the upcoming presidential election, Wirt found himself compelled to do all that he could in his official role as Attorney General prior to Jackson assuming office. As he wrote to his son-in-law, quote, "I'm anxious to make every blow tell." So he was like, I'm kind of concerned that this is not going to go well for us, so I need to try and get in as many cases as I can while I still can. Even though he said that he was not going to travel with his daughters again, in the summer of 1828, as his daughters Liz and Catherine were suffering from ill health, Wirt took them on a trip through the northern states to visit Round Hill, where their brother Will Jr. was enrolled. And so I'm assuming, wanted to get to that mountain climate, get some healthful air, and also, by the way, we can visit your brother, so that way I'm not alone with you.
Yeah, I feel like everybody who lived in cities at that point was basically waiting in 3 feet of mosquitoes breeding, of standing water. That's just what cities were. You were underwater, there were mosquitoes, it was hot, and people were just dying all the time. And yeah, that's why you had to go away.
Yeah. So it seems like that trip may have gone a bit better, but, I think the key thing was, I'm not going to be alone with them.
and maybe they were the kind of sick that's like quiet,
Yeah.
tired, rather than like whiny.
Yeah. No, you just rest in the back. That's fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
And of course, we know that Jackson won election as president in 1828. And so the Wirts began to prepare for William to be dismissed from his role as Attorney General. Now, for Elizabeth, this would be a relief. She was glad to think of moving from Washington and no longer having to serve as a hostess. Though she told her mother that, quote, "We entertain less than any other family with whom we associate," Elizabeth did not take to the hostess role and would be glad to have her time back to do other things. It's like, I'm done with this. I'm tired of your parties. Just smoke to your content, whatever. I don't care. I'm not hosting anybody anymore. Indeed, as Jabor notes of their years in Washington, quote, "Duty, not pleasure, was the hallmark of the Wirt's years in Washington, and duty increasingly was defined in highly gender-specific ways." Now, as many political couples would find over the ages, the Wirt's relationship was strained by William's draw to public office, which necessitated long hours and lots of time away from his family, while Elizabeth was left to manage a large family, a household, and social responsibilities expected to aid her husband's political career. We should note here that it wasn't guaranteed that Wirt would have to vacate his post, because this was a time before a precedent was established that cabinet members had to leave when an administration was ending. And, indeed, as we've seen in numerous instances, including when JQA came in, at the incoming president's insistence, cabinet members had remained in place. Wirt wrote to former President Monroe about this matter, and in Monroe's opinion, cabinet members, quote, "hold their offices as others do, as servants of the public, not the president's." So even Monroe was like, you know what? You don't really have to leave office. It's fine. You were confirmed. He can't remove you. Yeah, go ahead and tell that one to Andrew Jackson.
Right.
If you don't leave that office, Andrew Jackson is coming after you, and he's probably got some pistols with him.
I'd like to see someone try.
Yeah. And naturally, Wirt was like, no, I'm good. I'll go ahead and leave. I'll leave. Now, Wirt wrote to a friend summing up his tenure as follows, quote, "The office I've held for the last 12 years, I have filled without discredit to my country or myself. I hope with some honor to both. I leave it without a single reproach, even from my enemies, if I have any, and with the respect, I might say the affection, of the Supreme Court." So he thinks leaving office on a high note. And indeed, Glassner notes of Wirt's tenure as Attorney General that he, quote, "argued 138 cases before the Supreme Court."
Wow.
Now, only 39 of those were government cases, but Wirt won more than 2/3 of those. So he was a bit busy during his time.
Yeah, as Jabor said, he had a big duty. I'm sorry. You deserve someone more mature, Jerry. I can't.
If we can't go to potty humor, who can?
That's what I say.
I think that's a good philosophy. Yeah. Now, it should be noted that to this date, which is 2025 as of this recording, Wirt is the longest serving Attorney General of all time.
Wow.
And of course, now that it is pretty much expected that when a new administration is coming in, the old folks are probably going. We rarely see instances of people crossing administrations anymore and just staying in office. It still happens, but it's less likely, and it's less likely that somebody's going to be in there for this long of a tenure.
How long was his tenure?
So his tenure was actually, it was 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like a FDR-length presidency.
Exactly. And later commentators dubbed him, quote, "the first great Attorney General." And his biographer Glassner asserts that, quote, "he certainly was the first professional Attorney General. Wirt organized the office of the Attorney General in systematic fashion and fled the capital only during the unhealthy summer and when cases drew him to distant cities."
That was a lot. That was a good chunk of the year, to be fair.
Yeah, only those times. It's fine.
He only left a lot of the time.
But he got the water pitcher for the Attorney General's office. He finally got a desk. He got a water pitcher.
Yes, he was the first professional water pitcher getter.
Attorney General. He could finally offer you a glass of water.
Yeah. You used to have to go down to, Tiber Creek or whatever with a ladle.
Can we take this meeting outside? I need to go and fetch some water.
I'm a bit thirsty and I would like some dysentery.
Yeah, come on. Now, sadly, it seems that he wasn't able to take a last victory lap before leaving office, as just prior to leaving office, in February 1829, Wirt suffered from, quote, a violent attack of vertigo. Yeah, so thus the man who had given so much for so many years to public service left office on March 4th, 1829, in a weakened state. Good news, he did recover, and by mid-April 1829, the Wirts had packed up their household in Washington and moved into a rented house in Baltimore. So he's making that Maryland citizenship actually official.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. We'll wrap up this episode here, and I hope you'll come back for the thrilling conclusion of the fascinating life and career of William Wirt with Part 3, where we'll explore his later life and then review his career and legacy. Thanks so much again to my friend and fellow podcaster Howard Dory of Plodding Through the Presidents for joining me for this episode. Once you're done with this episode, be sure to check out Plodding Through the Presidents wherever you get your podcast, or you can check out the website at plodpod.com. I'll have a link to Howard's website on the page for this episode on my website, presidenciespodcast.com. There, you can find sources used for this episode, past episodes of the podcast, and links to more information about all of the American presidents. You can also find out more about how you, yes, you, dear listener, can help support the Presidency's podcast. Speaking of, I wanted to say a special thanks to all of our patrons. A special thanks to Matthew, Jeremy, Michelle, Joshua, Terrell, Allison, Alicia, Andrew, Bruce, Eric, Howard, John, Michael, Elizabeth, Ike, James, Michelle, and Scott. As a token of my appreciation, all patrons get access to an ad-free feed of the podcast, as well as special patron-exclusive episodes. We're currently going through a series on the Postmasters General prior to that office becoming a cabinet-level post. With the latest episode alone, you have political scandal, shady land deals, potential corruption, and more. Also, each level of support has an additional perk. Just check out patreon.com/presidencies if you'd like to become a patron. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach me via email at presidenciespodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach out to me on social media. I'm available on Facebook, Blue Sky, and Mastodon as Presidencies, on the formerly known as Twitter at Presidencies89, and on Instagram and Threads as Presidencies Podcast. I've also got a page on LinkedIn. Just search for Presidencies of the United States. Last but certainly not least, I thank you so much for listening. Until next time, stay safe and healthy, be kind to one another, and take care, dear friends.
Some things never go out of style, like trust, reliability, and driving a Toyota. Take the legendary Camry and Corolla, designed for comfort, engineered for performance. Hurry in. Offers end September 30th. Toyota, let's go places.